Hello and welcome. My name is Carol Carter and I'm the founder and the CEO of Global Minded. We are all about creating a capable, diverse talent pipeline to get more women, people of color, underrepresented. Any way that you can define diversity is how we define it. And to be able to get more of those talented individuals into the education and economic mobility and leadership pipeline. So we do that in a number of ways. One is we have an annual conference. This is our second year having this event be virtual. So we're in the middle of 10 weeks of our virtual event every day at 4 o'clock Eastern time. Another way we do this is through providing leadership programs for first generation to college students. So our applications just went out recently. And if you're from a university, you can nominate students to join this year's first gen leadership class. And we have a newsletter that's published every day that has feature stories on all kinds of remarkable first-gen graduates and role models like the people that you're going to hear from today. Another way that we achieve these goals is through summer bridge programs and fall and spring programs for freshmen, which connect them to what we call the hidden curriculum and role models, mentors, internships, and jobs. Finally, we have Inclusive Leader Awards across 15 industry sectors, and we believe strongly that until the DE&I leaders are household names, as many movie stars and sports stars are, we're not going to have the diversity that we need at the highest levels in our country. So that's just a little bit about how we do what we do, and I'm so thrilled today to introduce our panel leader, the esteemed panelists who are joining us today for this really critical topic. Jose Rodriguez spent 32 years as a partner at Kpmg Foundation. Kpmg is one of the sponsors of this, and he was not at the foundation. Our board chair was at the foundation, but Jose was at the Kpmg company, and he just retired March 1st. So he's got like the tiniest bit of free time for a lot of other really interesting things he's doing. And he's on the board of a public company. He is on the board of Wake Forest University of Miami School of Business, and also on the board of Marymount College with someone very special to all of us who you all may know, Dr. Irma Becerra. He just stepped off the board for the PhD project, and many of you may know that the PhD project is a big engine for getting people of color, African-American, Latino leaders, Native American leaders, and Asian Pacific Islanders into higher education through the PhD project. And these people are now leading universities, leading departments, and making a huge difference for the students that we serve. So Jose, welcome. And it's just so delightful to have you and your panelists here today.
Well, thank you, Carol. Obviously, based on the way Carol described me or introduced me, education, I think, is paramount, especially for Latinos. And it is a great way for any underrepresented diverse group. And it's a great way, it's the only way, in my opinion, to rise to the top. And that is through education. And having been born in Havana, Cuba, seeing my parents struggle and being able to provide an education for, me and my 4 other siblings, I thought was a great testament to their belief in education and to our future. So I think we're fortunate today to have some great leaders to talk to us about the importance of educating Latinos specifically. And what I'm going to do, unlike Carol, I would be terrible at introducing any of our panelists. So I'm going to start by letting everyone introduce themselves. And this is in no order. This is just the way they appear on my screen. So I am going to start off with Jeffrey. So if you could introduce yourself, Jeffrey, and then we'll go down the way I see folks on my screen.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Jose. Quick intro from myself. My personal story is really just about faith from hard work, gratuity, humility, and seizing on opportunity and giving back. I grew up without a father, low-income household, but because of the push of my mom. I say that again, because of the push of my mom, which in our community is a push we all have felt at some point, I suspect. I just kept going and kept trying. And I ended up graduating from the University of Maryland, College Park, and then on to Georgetown. And we had a tragedy in my family. While I was working in the banking industry, my grandparents, who had been married for 60 years, died in a house fire. And they died house fire where they were in an underserved community that was a gray area, underserved with respect to the services that you and I expect every day from a city. I listened to the push of my grandmother before she passed, where she would encourage me to not just work on doing things for myself, but for the community. So I got all in, and I devoted the rest of my career to getting into the federal government and helping with the Latino community. And I had an opportunity to build a career in the government where I was the chief learning officer in charge of learning for the nation's nuclear weapons program, the National Nuclear Security Administration. And I was a chief learning officer for one of the financial regulators in our country called the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. And during that time in my life, I was able to put together this crazy thing called the Hispanic Youth Symposium, where we work to help college students, high school students become college students by providing them a 4-day, 3-night leadership development program. And then while I was in government, I helped find funding for Hispanic serving institutions and HBCUs for STEM projects and other areas. And so my story is one of recognizing that to much is given, much is required. And so giving back to the community is what I'm about. And I serve on the Global Minded Board under the leadership of Carol.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey. Donna, I see you next on my screen.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here on a Friday afternoon. I told my new colleagues that it was a wonderful way for me to end the week. It was a long week, and I just left our Board of Trustees meeting. So this is a nice way to end. Donna Maria Blancero is my name, and I'm a very proud New Rican, which is a Puerto Rican born and raised in New York City. In particular, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm also the Vice President of Academic Affairs and the Provost, as well as a management professor at Bentley University, which is right outside of Boston. I am a first gen. I'm the youngest in my family and the first and only to have a college education. My dad went to school only until the 4th grade, and my mom did not finish high school. I don't believe that anybody, including my teachers, thought that I would continue my education. And quite honestly, I wasn't so sure either. But I am happy to tell you that I now hold a PhD from Cornell University's Industrial and Labor Relations School 30 years ago, which makes me feel quite ancient. My research has been on the experiences of Latinos in corporate America, and I've been doing that research for about 25 years. I'm hoping that during our conversations today that we can talk about 2 broad factors. One is having a community to rely on, and the other is having role models. I feel like that really has made a difference in my life. For me, as an undergrad, having a Black business professor who I immediately thought this man could be in my family was amazing. And it was at State University of New York, college at Old Westbury, wonderful school. He remained a mentor to me for most of my life. And as a faculty member, being part of the PhD project has really provided me with both a community as well as role models, and allowing me to also pay back and help those who are coming up after me. So I'm pleased to be here today.
Well, thank you, Donna. David, you're next on my screen.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is David Lopez. I am a recent graduate of the University of Colorado Boulder, Lead School of Business, where I obtained a degree in real estate. And outside of my degree, I'm also the co-founder and CEO of a company called Gritly, where we are a 12-week sales and emotional intelligence boot camp built to launch underserved communities such as women, minorities, and veterans into careers in tech sales. That has been a really fun learning journey where I've been able to really connect and impact individuals of minority descent and coming from underserved backgrounds. Have been able to tap into the global minded community and really advance our mission forward, and being able to collaborate with somebody like Carol has definitely been a supplement to everything that we're working on. So super excited to be on this panel, super excited to continue the conversation. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Carlos, it's your turn.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's so interesting to hear everybody's story. Mine is very similar to what you all have heard already. So I was born in a border town in northern Mexico, Nogales, Mexico. Moved to the U.S. when I was 12 years old. I was one of the ESL students, English language learners that you hear about. I had a fantastic teacher. He was both my ESL teacher and my Spanish teacher, Mr. Martinez, who I hope he's still alive. I talk about him all the time. He really put the emphasis on education and kind of, making sure that your enunciation was perfect. He would just drill us on the words, and I'm very grateful for all he did in my life. My family came over. My dad's an engineer. My family came over with an H-1B visa. During that process, my dad lost his job, and then our immigration status was very much pending, and then we switched into illegal. So I was actually illegally in this country for a long time, and it was my mother who insisted that we stay because she wanted to make sure that the kids had an American education. We went to college. Ended up back in Nogales, Arizona. Graduated from high school there, and I worked for a semester at McDonald's. This is a transition period. This is back when Ronald Reagan signed an amnesty for a bunch of people like me. And one of the original dreamers, I guess, one of the old school dreamers. I had the opportunity to go to college. So one day I was watching the news. It was snowing in Tucson. It also was the first day of university classes, and I picked up my bags. I got my high school transcript. I drove up to Tucson and I enrolled, got my dorm, and got everything going within a day. And I was back to the university. So that was been my career path. I graduated with an engineering degree. And then I got a master's degree in business from Thunderbird, and I worked in finance for about 10 years at Intel. I hit the same spot where some of you have talked about in terms of education, started reflecting about my life and what I wanted to do with my time, and just very grateful for the education I got and the opportunities that they opened up. And I always thought there was nothing special about me. There was always kids that I grew up with that were smarter than me, that they just didn't have that opportunity. And I felt a calling to do everything that I could to give the kids opportunity like I had. And so I started working at Intel in more of the external facing around getting more kids interested in engineering, math, and science, and higher education. And very, very proud of that path. And I'm looking forward to getting more into the conversation. Thank you.
Great, Carlos. Cristina, it's your turn.
It's my turn. Okay, thank you so much. Really enjoyed listening to everyone's background. And as you said, Carlos, I think I resonate a lot with what everyone has said, especially with you, because I also come from a border town, and that is Mexicali and Calexico. My home was actually right on the border, the fence. My front yard was the fence. And every morning I would wake up and I would talk to my cousins and the panadero, and then I'd go to school, and it was English only. So I was that kid that when I first went to kindergarten, and I'm the youngest of 12, by the way, youngest of 12. And when I went to kindergarten, my teacher was explaining the rules, and the rules were that in this class, you only speak English. And if you speak Spanish, there was a consequence. I didn't know what she was saying. So guess what? I spoke Spanish, and I got the consequence, and the consequence was donkey ears. And she asked me to move to the table. She says, you broke rule number 1. I knew I was in trouble. I had no idea what I was in trouble for, but I saw the donkey ears. I saw the door, and I ran away. I'm writing an article right now as the runaway kindergartner. And once again, because our language, was just not valued. I then went on to become a bilingual teacher. And so when I received my credential, I went back to talk to that teacher, and she was already retired, old, but I went to speak to her, and we talked about it. And basically what she told me, and the reason I want to make this point is because this has become my research, is she told me, Cristina, I am sincerely sorry. She goes, I really believed that the sooner that you left your language and the sooner you learned English, the more opportunity you would have to succeed in life. That's an ideology. It's the hegemony of English we under. So my life's research has been in developing this ideological consciousness in teachers to understand that when students walk into the door, we cannot be treated like that we have to be valued for who we are, the language that we bring, the culture that we bring, the traditions that we bring. So I spent, over 30 years in preparing teachers. In fact, I just got off a call where we were speaking about this, especially right now with the pandemic. What are we doing to really educate our Latinx community, especially when it comes to speakers of other languages? So that is the work that I've been doing. So currently, right now, I'm a first gen to go to college. I'm the first one in my family of 12 that went to college. But once I went to college, my older brothers and sisters were like, wait a minute, if you could do it, that means we could do it. And so I look at, all it takes is one of us to break that mold that we've been, I think like Donna said, it's like, it's like we were not expected to be able to do this, because I too, Donna, have my mother had a 3rd grade education. My father had a 7th grade education. We were field workers in the agriculture. We worked the fields. If we wanted something, you go work the field and make the money to be able to do that. So then I came to college. I came to San Diego State. And it was actually something that my mother did not want me to do, because she wanted to see me, the Latina that leaves the home in a white dress. That was more important than getting a college education. Donna, you're nodding. So and this is a common, it's still common. I speak to so many parents of young Latinas that they don't want them to go to college because they want to protect them. And so there's still a lot of work that we have to do there. I broke that mold. I left. And my family almost disowned me because I said, I've got to change my life. This is, I know there's more to this. So now, at the university, I'm able to really help, develop these path, roadmaps for individuals, for young Latinos, Latinas that are going there. So my job right now is I am the Associate Vice President for International Affairs. So that's another thing, is when we talk about global minded, and one of the reasons that I love being on this board, and Carol, thank you so much for your leadership, is that yes, we have to really expand the Latinx view globally. And so right now, the work that I'm doing is really providing pathways for Latinos to be able to engage in global education. And especially we're on the border, so we do a lot of trans-border work, but what about the rest of the world? And I think that this pandemic has really heightened for us the need for us to be interconnected with the world, no matter who we are. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cristina, and thank you for never putting on those donkey ears.
I know, seriously.
Continuing on. So, why don't we get off with a question I have? And Donna, I think I'm going to pose this to you actually. And, I really do want all the other panel members to weigh in on their thoughts. So I'm going to kick it off with Donna. So Donna, how can higher education better graduate Latino leaders who can ascend in the corporate ladder?
Thank you for that, Jose. Interesting question. Certainly something I've given thought to over my years. As I mentioned earlier, much of my research has really focused on challenges and experiences for both executive and professional level Latinos and Latinas. And one of the things that I uncovered, as well as many others, is the real importance of mentoring and a developmental network. I think that in the past, networking was looked at as very transactional, and people didn't necessarily feel like it was something they wanted to do. because I think the thought of, showing up someplace and exchanging business cards and, okay, I know this person now, but that's certainly not what a developmental network is, right? A developmental network is really developing relationships with people that are based on reciprocity. So even a very junior person, or maybe I want to say in today's world, especially a very young person, can give a lot back to somebody who maybe has different experiences and maybe longer experiences. So I think that that's one that's really important, because I'm assuming I'm not alone on this panel. The older I've gotten and the more experience and high level positions I've been in, I realize just how important that network is, again, for getting your own help, for having peers that you can just talk with, and also for helping others. I also think that it's absolutely key to provide leadership training and experiences to students. I think it's really important for students to start early and to understand what it's like to actually lead a group. Again, I'm guessing I'm not the only one who at times is leading a group of peers and wondering why nobody is really listening to you. And it means that you really have to lead from influence and not necessarily from formal authority. So for students to learn that early on is a tough lesson. I know many of them have told me, but I think it's a lesson that really is important. And then the last thing I would bring up is really this need to get out of our own space and to recognize that there are lots of differences in the world, lots and lots of differences. And I think that, I know at Bentley, we really work to help our students be better human beings. By being a better human being and understanding the world, I believe you're a better business person. Understanding things like cultural literacy, understanding our own biases, understanding how to react when somebody has a microaggression against us, being exposed just to different perspectives. I think that really helps everyone, and in particular, I'm thinking helps our students really develop into strong leaders, whether they're formal leaders or informal leaders, as they progress in their careers.
Anybody else wants to share their thoughts on that?
I've got a couple of thoughts that come to mind, and I can't believe I forgot this when I was introducing myself. So I'm president and CEO of a company called Generationology, and we help organizations manage and lead across generations. And so what Donna was saying perfectly fits with the kinds of research and activities we are involved in, but primarily we've got to help, really help higher ed recognize that we've got to build our intergenerational collaborative intelligence and recognize what does that mean in a multicultural space. And so what that looks like in practice, because I'm very tactical when we have these conversations too, is we really got to give students an authentic big picture about this thing called work, help them develop a strategic vision of work. What does work life look like? And what does it mean to contribute in the workplace? And I think Donna hit it right on the head, where you got to go through an experiential model at some point. But we also need to be very tactical in convening Latino students and Latino leaders together, whether it's through whatever kind of information exchange and role play, where we're exposing young men and women to corporate concepts of success and practice those concepts. We are a trust exchange community. So, when we're talking to communities outside of our own, everybody says they believe in trust, and they do. But in the Latino community, it's a little different. When we ran this, thing called the Hispanic Youth Symposium, whether or not I was leading the whole program or not, when I met a parent, they had to look me in the eye and knew that I was going to take care of their son or daughter in many cases for the next 3 or 4 days. And there was a literal trust exchange that needs to take place. When we're in conversation with young folks, we really have to make sure that we're talking about skill development and skill enhancement and how that relates to career pathing and career development. When I served as a chief learning officer, I was on the other end. So higher ed had them all go through, then they graduated, and now they were going to be employees. And our responsibility was, what is it that they're missing? What's the gap? And how do we train them? If the two just had a conversation, industry and government and NGOs, in a way that was real, to say, here's the gap and here's We don't expect you to come out of college to being perfect, but what we do expect is that you're eager, and leading with curiosity so that you can understand the skill sets you don't have, and you embrace this conversation of being a continuous learner. The chief learning officer world and the academic world actually got together in a meaningful way. I think they would be able to give all students, but Latino students an edge, because we are incredible multi-generational leaders. Ask anybody on the panel, I'm sure in your household, what's the youngest person that hangs out and what's the oldest? And probably we cover 4 generations. So if we focus on building our intergenerational collaborative intelligence, I think we're going to find incredible success in how we grow leaders.
Well, one of the things that I've enjoyed over my career, and I think all of you have mentioned it in your introduction, has been that concept of mentorship, that concept of finding someone that kind of looks like you, kind of has been in your shoes, and being able to identify with them and reaching out to them, developing that. And I think it's hugely important, reaching out to them, developing a relationship. But it's, one of the things that I kind of really liked when I was on the board of the PhD program and its mission, and that was, getting professors into the classrooms that actually looked like some of the students that they were trying to teach. And I think that's hugely important. That's very important to me when you're looking for a mentor, and you've got to be able to make that connection. I think that helps if, and I wish I would have had, more of them as I grew up, and having more Latinos that I could look up to and I could connect with. And I think we all on this panel have an obligation to act as mentors and to do so. Cristina, you're shaking your head.
Yes, I'm agreeing with you. Absolutely. I was just thinking right now, I'm at San Diego State University, again, a border university, a binational university, and we are an HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution. So one of the things that we have been doing is looking at what can we do as a university to have a more seamless connection with K-12 education, the university, and then of course the business sector. Because I think that is there are so many gaps in between that. But just as far as a Hispanic serving institution, that's a term that is used, right? Hispanic serving. So really what I'm doing right now with my colleagues and some leaders is looking at what does it really mean to serve the Latinx community? Because serving and enrolling are 2 different things. Gina Garcia has done some excellent work on looking at the different categories, and you have a Hispanic enrolling institution, a Hispanic producing, and then a Hispanic serving. So I think that for the majority of our time, SDSU and many other universities, we're not the only one, enroll students, and we produce them, but how do we really serve them? So we're doing a lot of work, and I'm working in the leadership in this area to see what can we do to really serve our students. So that goes back to the mentorship, Jose, that you just mentioned. And it's like, when students come here, do they have someone that they can go to that can guide them? How can we begin to do that? And I think it goes back to the kind of work that we're doing in Global Minded too, is really offering this mentorship and offering these multiple perspectives that Donna just mentioned earlier. But I think that if we begin to do this, and one of the things that we just launched this semester that I'm super proud about is that we are offering our Latinx students what we're calling the Global Seal of Biliteracy. We have so many students. We have students that speak Spanish, but Spanish is never really recognized. It's the thing, right? It exists. But now we have our first cohort that's graduating. In fact, we're having their ceremony tomorrow, where they're graduating with their business degree and a global seal of biliteracy. They went through a rigorous test, and now they're able to show evidence so that when they go somewhere, they say, I bring some value added. Because as we all know, someone asked me this question, they go, well, how do you know if someone really is bilingual? So there's different levels of bilingualism, right? But now what we're doing is, so we're saying, if you speak Spanish, this is something that we can continue to develop and that you can graduate and show evidence. So that's just one piece. But of course, everything else is also looking at the culture, looking at the value, and just really understanding who we're working with as professors. One of the things that a lot of our professors have found is with the limited amount of Latinos that we have at the university, we're taxed because our Latino students, they look for us, and we have a larger load of students to mentor than anybody else. So we're looking at the equity issues that have to do with that. But now I feel that we're in a really good space to continue to do this, but it's taken many years. But I think the movement is going in the right direction for that.
David, given a recent student grad, what do you think the universities can do more to prepare you for ascending that corporate ladder?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I do. I think, it's really, to hit on the points, that have already been mentioned, which are the most critical points around mentorship and experience, and it's a heavy burden to put on, but I think our students need to be educated and exposed to these kinds of opportunities earlier on, where if, like us being first generation, coming from a low income background where we have no industry connections on the other side of this degree, we don't know what is really at stake. And it really can start at the freshman year level, where you're fresh out, that you're making a huge leap, moving to college, moving to a dorm, trying to find yourself, go through the social experience, but also to give these students the exposure and the importance that start building your network now, utilize that student card, and reach out not only for whatever resources are on campus, for mentorship and internships, but also to build your own network outside of that, and really, take a leap of faith and understanding that people want to help students. You just have to, take that initiative to go out. But that is, understandable that's a lot to ask of younger students, but that's just a challenge that, we face coming in as first generation with no industry connections, where a lot of our peers may have that, and then later on down the road ask, well, why was it so easy for them, and now I'm struggling.
Yeah, can I just kind of jump on David's point around mentors, and the importance of that, right? Because I just kind of think about my path, and my first job out of college was with Procter and Gamble, and one of the ways I got my foot in there is because I happened to talk to a recruiter when they were on campus, and they were from the same hometown as I was, and we started talking. His name was Roy Firestone, and I didn't let go of that contact, right? And so I think that network is so important, and I've seen in my career kind of like this transition of corporate America where diversity was important, and then it's a business driver. Now it's becoming the not only the diversity, but also looking at the culture and how inclusive the culture is. And so when I talk to my alma mater, for example, I know they're going through this process, the D&I process. You need to hire, your faculty need to reflect the community that you're serving too. And these are some really tough conversations to have, but everyone's got to kind of pitch in, because if you don't have an environment that helps people become comfortable, they can't grow, and they can't develop these skills that are so important, right? And that goes on the corporate side too, in terms of our own environment and how welcoming it is, and what kind of biases exist, right? So I think that level of awareness is totally there, especially for high tech companies. Are looking for anywhere they can find women and minority students that have these skills, because if we don't have that diversity of thinking, the technology is not as good, right? Whatever technology we're developing is not as good, and so you need all those different points of views, and the culture helps tremendously in doing that. And so I really like David's point about the not only the mentors, but also finding a a way home, or a way to make the university experience at home or more comfortable in that transition.
Great.
If I
So,
can just add something to that, I've learned so much from my new colleagues, so I'm really appreciating this time. And I wanted to comment on something David said, which I want to repeat because I think it's just so profound. Part of the first gen experience, of course, is that we don't speak that language. We don't know what's behind the curtain. Perhaps my favorite book, and the one that I feel touched my heart, was My Beloved World by Sonia Sotomayor. And if you haven't read that book, really, it is just an incredible book. And one of the things she speaks about is being a student at Princeton, right? Top school. You would think she knows how to do everything. And she was applying to law school and didn't really get what that meant. Like, not really understanding it, because she obviously had no one that she could go to and speak to. And I was in that very same situation. I decided that I wanted to get a PhD, and I had no idea what that meant, like literally just no idea. And I know that my work is really now about not just helping students, but helping faculty, because we're all on this journey to some level. And Christina's point about sort of the heavy load around service for many faculty of color is real, and we have to take care of them.
Mhm.
great. So, universities are the first step, I guess, into getting into the corporate world. So, or can be. So, what can universities do to help, one, attract more Latinos, and then build them as leaders? Cristina, you're an educator, so you're the logical one, and you and Donna are logical ones for me to pick on. So,
Okay, no, I'm happy to be picked on. Well, first of all, I think one of the things that we're doing right now at our university is looking at the value added that a lot of our Latinos bring. Many of you know right now we have many dual language programs that are throughout the nation. And we have so many students that are graduating with their biliteracy seal, but yet when they come to the university, there's no acknowledgement for that. When they're in dual language programs, they speak, read, and write in two languages, but the university is not giving any. So we're working on what value added can we give, because it really is not official right now. It's like, okay, well, they can just mark it down, but what do we do there? Also, just looking at the different experiences. I think back, my husband was a high school principal, and I recall sometimes we would go downtown to, have a night out, and he was in the barrio, and of course it was like SAT time, and our kids were home, well fed, well tutored, ready to take the test the next day. And who do we run into? A lot of his students that are working late at night. And my husband would ask him, aren't you taking the SAT tomorrow? So he goes, yeah, I am at 8 o'clock in the morning. So how is, so the equity in that, and I'm saying, what can we do to really take care of our students so that they do have an opportunity to go to college? And also that we are looking at, when we're admitting students, saying like, these students were working throughout their high school education. So a lot of this information is just to really begin to look at the whole child, look at the individual, and look at the opportunities or lack of opportunities that they've had. So we're having a more holistic process. So I think that that's something that all universities need to do that. And not just for Latino students, but just for all students that come from underserved communities. That's number one. The second thing I think is that if we really want to attract more Latinos to our communities, we need to change the way that we do things. It can't just be, you come to us. We have to go to them. One of the things that we're doing right now, because we have we have a lot of students that are at the border, and we have many students that live in Tijuana. They live across the border. Guess why? It's cheaper. They're US citizens, but they can't afford the rent in San Diego, so they live across the border. So for them to make the haul from crossing the border and to get to San Diego State is very, very difficult. So one of the things that we have started to do right now is developing microsites that are close to the border or just, South San Diego so that they can attend. So just coming up with more innovative things, asking the community what would work for you. Also speaking to parents, and this is something that I hold very near to my heart because of my own upbringing where my parents didn't want me to go to college. It's really interesting right now that you said about Sotomayor. My dad would always tell me, tú debes ser una abogada. You should be a lawyer. But he had no idea how to tell me how to be a lawyer. It was just like, it was his way of telling me you're smart, right? And then I always grew up as like, what do you have to do to be a lawyer? And actually, I started my career, my education. I wanted to be a lawyer because I didn't know what else, what else do you, but I had no idea how to do it. So these are the types of things that we need to also work with parent education, our Latino parents, just to let them know, what the process is. And we have an amazing program that you probably all know about is PICA. It's a Parent Institute for Quality Education, where we prepare parents so that they know about the requirements to go to college and so on and so forth. So we have, it goes back to that seamless, organization or connection where we're working with the community, we're working with the parents, we're working with the students, and we're working with the university leaders to also change business as usual if we in fact are, serious about attracting more Latino students.
Donna?
Yeah, I was gonna say, would you like me to follow up on that? You never have to ask me twice,
Absolutely.
because something that Cristina said really resonated, and again, I'd like to just amplify it, and that is ask what people want. I don't think that as leaders, generally speaking, that's something that is intuitive to people. It's sort of like, oh, I know what you want, but no, we don't, right? I mean, we don't know what many people want. And so I think really reaching out and asking about what does somebody need and what does somebody want goes a long way. And I would say in particular, first gen and particular Latino students who are first gen, it can be very hard to ask. My first experience as an assistant professor was a horrible one. I can look back on it now and I see why it was. I left that institution maybe 18 years ago, demoralized, physically sick, not sure that I was good for anything, basically. And I think it was, there were many reasons. We won't go into all the reasons, but nobody ever reached out to ask if I needed help. And I felt like just nobody cared. And something that left such an impression on me that I can talk about it now, and it happened 27 years ago, right? As soon as I started as a young assistant professor, of course I was only 10 because I was really a prodigy.
Of course.
I was with two full professors. For those of you that are a little less familiar, you typically go from assistant professor to associate professor to full professor. So full professor certainly was a big deal then for me. Commented on another junior faculty member who didn't know how to do a certain type of analysis. And their remark was, she doesn't deserve to get tenure. She doesn't know how to do structural equation modeling. And I remember immediately putting that in the back of my mind. You can never ask a question, because if you were to ask a question, you'd be looked at as stupid, which of course is exactly the opposite of what we want students, employees, faculty to feel. Fast forward 20 years later, coming to Bentley, I remember over lunch discussing with one of my friends, I said, I'm having trouble with this data and I'm trying to figure out if it's a moderator or a mediator. I can't figure this out. And she said, well, why don't you go ask so-and-so? And I'm like, no, please don't ask her. And I look back on that as being so influenced by that first experience. And some of our students have that, right? They have, whether they don't speak English well, whether they have something else going on that they were told that they weren't smart enough. And that stays with you. Again, I mean, when I'm relaying the story right now, I could sort of feel that feeling that I felt at that first job and how horrible it felt. And I think that was, for me, that was a real pivoting moment that I was going to, at some point, get to the point where I would help faculty of color. Because again, working with the PhD project for over 2 decades, if we have faculty of color in front of the classroom, we're more likely to have students of color in the classroom and more likely to grow leaders who can go into industry. It's that simple. So we each have to work at a different place. And again, for me right now, it's supporting all of our faculty, of course, but our faculty of color first and foremost.
Great. So if I were to ask, and I want all of you, I'm going to put all panelists on the spot here. I'm kind of good at doing that sometimes. So we're all Latino leaders. So whether we're in business, whether we are in education, you know, we're at a critical time, I think, in the US and in the world. So, you know, how do we build a stronger pipeline, and how do we try to heal some of this divide that we have? And don't be a chicken.
I guess I'll start with that. And it begins with a concept that is so ingrained in our community that I think we become ambassadors to the rest of the world. And that's give back, man. Don't be consumed with yourself or where you're going. Help someone move ahead, and in the process, you're going to receive great things. One of the things that Donna mentioned and Cristina alluded to, you know, I've been doing a lot of study on, and the terminology that's utilized is minority tax or cultural tax. And so we talk a lot about like things like systemic racism, but we don't talk about systemic exclusion. And what that means, if we're going to, you know, address this divide, is we've got to recognize that minority tax and cultural tax, for those who don't know, you know, the true definition is, you know, you and I, we pay taxes, right? You and I we buy something at the store, there's a sales tax. All of us pay. But when you're a minority leader, you are asked to come in, be a professor, be a chief learning officer, whatever the case is, you're asked to have that leadership role. And then comes the tax, which is because you care so much about the community, here's 16 different things that you can do. And if you say no, then, well, do you really care about the community? Well, in the spirit of equity, isn't the whole idea that we want to be more inclusive everybody's responsibility? So why is it that the minority tax means I've got to do more than others in this area? And how does this bear out in a practical sense? Because there are a lot of minority leaders, storied, incredible minority leaders who are, I'll use the word, not necessarily afraid, but they approach participating with trepidation because they know as soon as they stick their toe in the water, they're going to be asked to do 10 different things. So rather than do that, they sit on the sidelines and they're not invited. So to address this divide, if you will, to really put ourselves in a position where we are not just attracting strong leaders, but we're building a pipeline, we got to recognize the imbalance that exists and then talk about it openly and then approach it with some authenticity and vulnerability. Because at the end of the day, if we do more things where we eulogize before we criticize, I think we're going to find ourselves in a position where the pipeline that we want becomes the pipeline we experience. But it requires us to recognize the systemic inequity that exists, because otherwise great minority leaders sit on the sidelines, not because they want to participate, but because they're going to feel overburdened.
But the bottom line from you is get engaged.
Jeffrey, my brother from another mother. I love that. And I'm going to take it a step further. I think what often happens is we are uber scrutinized because we often stand alone. So I recently was speaking to a group and commented that when I was younger, I think there was a certain amount of pride that I had on being the first of many things. Now I dread that. Now I can't believe that it's 2021. I'm the first Latina provost at my school. But in addition to standing up and deciding to do it, is having, I guess I'll say again, it's that hyper scrutinization. And let me just give you an example. If you have a white male leader who fails, Jerry failed. Next, we need to find somebody. You may have Donna Maria who fails, and it becomes, we tried a Latina once.
Yep.
It just don't work out. So there's additional pressure because we're trying to reach out and help others of all types, right? Just trying to help others. But there's also that heavy burden of not just caring, but of knowing that we're really being closely watched. And that's something, again, that we have to talk about openly and work across all kinds of boundaries and all kinds of differences, because that really makes a difference in someone's career.
I couldn't agree more. Carlos or David?
I think for me, and Donna was kind of touching on this. We Latinos have a little bit of a different style in terms of how we get stuff done, right? And sometimes that gets confused by the style gets confused with the result, and you reach a certain point where you just have to have self-confidence that at the end of the day, it's the result that matters, and have faith that that's what matters. And that's something that I learned, right, in my career, in my different jobs that I've had, is I've been so output focused in terms of result, but also pay attention to the style and the possible criticism that you might get because of your style. And that softened up quite a bit in terms of the corporate culture, being more forgiving on that. But Latinos coming up, you are who you are, right? And you just have to embrace it and have confidence that it's going to work, because we got hundreds of years of culture behind us, right? And we just have to kind of embrace it. And sometimes that's hard because you can't question that about yourself and your abilities, and you just have to stay strong. And that's where mentors come in and help validate that. And I kind of look for those opportunities. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And Carlos, I think, going back to mentoring and back to some of the cultural aspects, and as you climb that corporate ladder, at least from some of my experiences, and I really honestly do believe it's cultural. At least in my family, it was be grateful for what you have. And as a result, I don't think maybe throughout my career, though I had a great career, I gave myself credit and, without being arrogant, patted myself on the back and took care of it. And to your point, Carlos, it's cultural. And that's why I think maybe with, Latinos, it's even more important to have that mentor, more important actually to have somebody that can, show you off, in essence, because we're not going to do it ourselves. And culturally, and that's, to me, that's why it's so important.
I could just add on as well. I think this is where organizations like Global Minded come into play, because I think it starts at the high school level to get these students exposed to the different kinds of opportunities and workforce, jobs and careers that are on the other side of getting a degree. But I think it's important for them to be able to tap into somebody that's, close in age to them, that has an experience similar to theirs, because at some point, I've had mentors that are, that are retired and give me advice, and I love that advice, but sometimes it's not necessarily accurate because times have changed, or I'm going through a specific scenario that is, currently where I wish I had someone that was 2 years older than me, that maybe, once Global Minded students are graduating from high school, going into college, they turn around right away and can be that resource, even if it was just an ambassador for that high school, and saying, hey, look, I just made, I went through college applications, I had to pick, I did financial aid, all of that. Now let me help and let me be that resource. And then they're being, they have a resource that is like me, where I just graduated, I overcame that one. And then for me, having someone that's a few years into their career, that way it's we're all speaking each other's language in a way that, isn't too far-fetched and isn't too, out of left field in any way where it's, oh, okay, I actually went through that struggle, I seen that struggle, but I needed to hear it from someone that was, a little bit closer in age to me, that can serve as that mentor, or even, loose guidance, almost like an older sibling, where we all might be first gen.
I'm just gonna, David, I completely agree with your point, and I had a similar mentality when I was probably about your age. I had an older mentor, and I didn't appreciate all the lessons he was trying to teach me until later in my life. So, file the old people's sayings away in your brain, and at some point they'll make sense. So,
They eventually do make sense.
They do.
Trust me. So look, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left. So, I'm going to ask one more question, and I'm just going to go around the screen and just give me your thoughts. So, I'm going to start with you, Jeffrey, since you're the first person I can see on the screen. Where you are today, what do you think your challenges, what do you think the challenges and opportunities that you face today are?
It's a great question. And so, I sit in a space kind of like Donna said earlier, where you're isolated. We know the names Simon Sinek, we know the name Ken Blanchard, we know the name John Maxwell, and those are considered thought leaders. And that's what I'm too, a thought leader. But we don't find usually a Latino name in that area. And so when I think about opportunities and some challenges as a thought leader, it's very clear to me right now that our world's changed. And so I think executives have an opportunity to be a whole lot more real, a whole lot less fake, be more authentic and less robotic. And so one of the things that I'm doing is helping executives and leaders around, one of my clients is the United States Military Academy, West Point. How do you do that in a way that's going to resonate with the folks that you're engaging with? And for staff, it's really stop being so hard on yourself. Perfection is an illusion, but presence and hard work is a possibility. So it's really okay, to love your profession, but don't be holistically defined by it, nor should you be defined by your stats, your likes. Social proofing is important, but I think to Carlos's point a moment ago on, keeping those things in the back of your mind, it doesn't tell your whole story, and it never will. So you got to be more accepting of yourself and give yourself a space to grow. And finally, for students, just be motivated, keep motivated, be accountable, understand that, Latinos, we're an in-person community, but man, we use technology like nobody's business. And just to help people recognize that they can be successful in a hybrid world, because that's what we're going to be working in. The world of work has changed. So we've got to find ways to give before we get and to offer before we ask. And if we do that, opportunities are going to be not just they're present, but they're going to be accessible for, I think, a community that has a superpower, which is the Latino community. And our superpower is our multiculturalism and our capacity to live in a multi-generational space.
Great. Donna?
My apologies, I had trouble with my mute button. I'm going to be very brief, and I realize that this may be a strange comment to make, but I'm going to go out there and say it anyway. And that is that I have frustration that some leaders overall, not Latino leaders, believe that somebody who leads from the heart and leads by inclusion might not be as strong as somebody who just says, do this. And the world has changed, and those individuals need to catch up.
Well, you said you were going to be powerful, and you definitely were.
Thank you.
David?
Yeah, I think the main challenge is, for all of us that are, here today, we're all, first generation, leaders in our field. But there's definitely a community that we all grew up with that didn't have the same opportunities that we may have as fortunate and or as lucky as we may have been. And so just really trying to find ways to empower and serve those communities that maybe didn't have the opportunity to go to college, to get them access to workforce opportunities that we do, because just because they don't have a degree doesn't mean they don't deserve access. So that's where I'm at.
Right. Carlos?
But my challenge is just keeping my ears open, making sure they don't get full of wax instead of my ways. So I've enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you.
Cristina?
Right now, I was just thinking of a question that many of my students will ask me, and they say like, Dr. Alfaro, how did you plan out your career? How did you decide that you were going to be where you are right now? And I didn't, all I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to have more opportunities. And I started to, going back to what Donna said, is follow my heart. It's like, what really motivates me? Can I give back to the community? How can I create pathways? How can I break down barriers for others? And in doing that, I got to where I am. And, so I never really, saw myself as associate, vice president for international affairs. And I know when I was speaking with my provost, when he hired me, he said, and I said, I really never was seeking upper leadership. I was very happy being a professor, and writing and doing things like that. And he says, you know what? The best leaders are not the ones that are vying for these positions. They're the people that are doing the work because it really matters to them. And I really feel that if I ever lose this feeling, it's time for me to leave. It's time for me to step out of the way and let others, come in. But it's more about the mission. It's not about me. It's not about the university. It's about the mission that we have embarked upon, and then just helping to develop other mentors. I know a lot of my students will also ask me, well, how can I pay you back? Or how can I say, pay it forward? You become a mentor to somebody else. So now in the role that I am, because I'm not able to mentor as many students as I used to, because I'm doing a lot of administrative work, is I'm able to say, hey, go talk to Melissa, go talk to so-and-so. And now I see the people that I've mentored that are doing beautiful jobs of mentoring. And that just gives me so much joy. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cristina. So Carol, before I wrap today up, is there any final comments you would like to make? But I'm going to reserve the right as a moderator to make my own final comment.
I'll pass it back to you. I'll just say that I have, because I shared this with Carlos when we first met, that because I grew up in Tucson, and really they're kind of in the heart of the whole Hispano-Americano culture, and have always just had such love for your culture. And I really believe right now, with all of the threadbare things in our world and the kinds of ways that, conversations and things have not been coming together, that this culture that you're from, especially of the relational, of the kitchen table, of the amazing food, of the abuelas and abuelos and all the, there's just so much rich, heritage there that I really feel is such a key, along with, our Native American leaders and African American leaders and Asian Pacific Islanders. There's just such richness in what is so amazing about what each culture has to share with us and has to enrich us. And I just really feel like spending this hour with you all, it just is so clear, to me, that that's the case, and also just brings, so much joy of memories of, Mexico and parts of South America that I've been able to visit, and just, the amazing people that are part of this giant web that is all of you. So that's just my thought. But I just really have enjoyed being with you guys and been looking forward to this day all week. So,
well, I want to first thank all the panelists today for first of all, your participation, but more importantly, your candor, your thoughts, and your heart that came clearly out. And here's my final comment, especially about the importance of education. So I was born in Cuba. My parents came over to this country, and to Jeffrey's point about multi-generational. I had to deal with mom and dad and abuelita. And what they always taught the five of us is, and it's to me, and I try to instill this in my own children, is they gave us three life things. They always said three things to us that stick in my mind. And I think it's very important for all of us. And that is, money may come and go. Your body of knowledge will be there with you forever. So try to obtain as much as you can. And lastly, your integrity is only yours to lose. And if you can stick by that, I think we all Latinos or Hispanics have a great opportunity. And with that, I want to thank Carol and everyone else, and have a great evening or great day wherever you may happen to be today.
Thank you so much again, Jose. And this session's recorded. We hope you will liberally share it with all your different networks. And I just want to put a little plug in that next week, we're working with our partners out of London, 1HE. We'll have leaders from all over the world next week who lead in higher education, followed by the first week of June with the National Science Foundation, and just some incredible leaders that entire week. And then we have our health equity leaders a whole week following that. And then we will have our program for our first gen leaders and this year's 2021 leadership class. So there's a lot ahead. And also, if you can't make it live at 4 o'clock Eastern time, you can always get these on our YouTube station later. So thanks to all of you. It's just been really a delight and such a great way to end the week and start the weekend. So gracias por todo y hasta luego la próxima vez.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much. Yay.